Continuing in the 48th chapter, understanding the insight, the limitlessness of God, and that God contracts upon that, ultimately, to create you and I. And many nuances over here that we've been speaking about. So yesterday we spoke about that you can have an image of this pen in your mind, and what do we call it? It's encompassing. It's encompassed in your mind, the image of this pen. So we continue on that idea. Short class, simple, well, I don't know, simple. But Isaiah says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. God's thoughts are ultimately impossible to truly process and to understand. Right? How does God know things? He knows all created beings because he encompasses them. Every created thing, from the highest level to the lowest level, are actually all a reality that is part of God in his thought. So this pen, I have the image, and I have the image of it in my mind. I think it in my mind. It exists in my mind, right? But God's thought is not like ours. Because for God, the pen, or the metaphor that the Alter Rebbe uses here, the orb of the earth, God's knowledge encompasses the entire diameter of the globe, of the earth, together with the deepest interior and the lowest depths, all in actual reality. I only have the image of this in my mind. God doesn't have the image of me, the pen, or the example here, the orb of the earth, the image of it in his mind. He has it actually, literally, in reality in his mind. His knowledge constitutes the vitality of the whole physical reality that he creates as something from nothing. Right? However, it wouldn't come into being as a finite, limited being unless there was a minute degree of light that would create it, the physical reality, through the contractions that come from God. So, and therefore God is animating and sustaining it in a finite, limited form in the fact that he contracts the infinite light of his to sustain it. And that's it. It's very short, and it will continue this thought tomorrow. But what does that mean? Very simply, how does God know me? How does he know you? It's because we are in his mind. So how do I know the existence of this pen? Because the image of it is imprinted and encompassed in my mind, but only the image of it I know. So I don't know it intimately. Well, you could know it somewhat, but not really, because it's only the image. Now, that image exists in my mind as long as I think it. I stop thinking it, what happens? The pen doesn't exist, at least in my mind. God, on the other hand, the pen, me, the entire universe is in his mind, the actual reality of it, the physicality of it. So that's hard for us to wrap our minds around it because we don't have something like that. But we understand that. Well, tomorrow we're going to go and explain how that is, in fact, has to be so. Um, but the important thing is that we're encompassed in the mind of God and his thought as a result. And therefore, what does that mean? Now, from there, that God would be aware of me. The only way there is a me that I can, from my perspective, sense a me is because he contracts the light that allows me to feel me, an independent being. But at the same time, what's hidden is the fact that the essence of God, the infinite of God, is the source of that animation that's creating me something from nothing. I'm just not aware of it. It's hidden. But it is a reality. It is. So, we live in a world today that perhaps the worst thing is to be alone, to feel that you're alone. And that leads to a lot of psychological, emotional damage, and even to worse things than that. We're not alone. We're in the thought of God. He's animating me at this very moment on two dimensions. One is the infinite of him that I'm totally not aware of in his thought, the infinite being of God, and with a contracted light that allows me to sense my, separateness, my independence, and allows me to try to become aware of this reality, that you're not alone. And this is really important, especially coming out of a pandemic where so many people were alone, and still there's a lot of people who are choosing to, they're elderly in particular, very, concerned, very, very, very worried about, contracting anything. So they still remain alone. And it has a negative consequence. So we need to know for ourselves that we're not. We're not alone. Now, of course, we're human, so therefore we want to have human contact. But you can have human contact and still feel very much alone. I know people like that. And that's brokenness. That's the real brokenness. Because they don't look at themselves the way they should. And they got too many things that are broken within that doesn't allow them to sense that they are not alone, that they are connected, that God is in. We're in the thought of God. Again, both the infinite light of God that we're not aware of, and the contracted light that we can become aware of certain dimensions of godliness as a result, and not feel alone. So, what's the call to action for this? I would suggest two things. One is that we should contemplate this idea that we are in the thought of God. Just like I can conjure up a vision in my mind of my family being together and for a holiday and celebrating, and the wonderful experience that is, and it only exists because I think it. So in God, it exists because he thinks it. I exist. So the fact that I am existing is only because God's thinking of me. Well, if he's thinking of me, I'm connected to him. That means I'm not alone. When you know that someone else is thinking about you, isn't that a great feeling? You don't feel alone. And you know that person's thinking about you. That's beautiful. And that will help us tremendously. Will help us tremendously. So the call to action is to give thought to this every day. Think about it. Meditate upon it for 30 seconds. 1 minute. 30 seconds to 1 minute. Second call to action is, just because you come to Tanya, so you're living a more heightened spiritual awareness, more connective to the truth, to Torah, to God. But not everybody is. So what's the call to action? Reach out to somebody who might be alone, just to say hello and see how they're doing. Maybe you don't have to inspire them about this message. I don't know if they'll be ready for the message. This message has got to come, in the right way. Maybe if they came to learn, then they'd be inspired by the message. But, you coming and giving them this message may not work, may backfire. So maybe don't share the message. Maybe if you live the message and they see how exuberant you are, full of joy, loving, caring. Why? Well, you're not alone. So maybe it'll rub off on them. That's my call to action. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Galise. In this analogy, would the creator of the pen continue to keep the image and the inner workings of the pen in his mind? Yes. So it's not the image of it. We have only the image of this. We are literally, in our physical reality, in the thought of God. So, not just the image. And therefore, because God thinks it, therefore we are. If he would stop thinking it, we wouldn't be. So the fact that we actually exist is based on the thought of God, right? And the fact is, though, that God thinking means we are bound up with him. And we're bound up again, not just a contracted light that we can become aware of, but the infinite light is also there, but we're not aware of it. Rick, I don't see your question. I lost the feed. If you want to repost your question, that would be great. Okay, Elise, I'm glad. You got it. Wonderful. Yeah, it's hard for a human mind to take all of this in. That's why we come back every day to learn. Little by little, drop by drop. We change our... Drop by drop, we change. Yes. Marcy, please share with us.
I was wondering at what point we're qualified to share what we think we've learned.
Good question. At any time. As everyone said by Fabringen, when a child goes to school and learns the letter Aleph, you know how we should raise that child? In such a way that they want to share the letter Aleph with another child. So at all points you can share. That's not the issue, though. It's not about you sharing. It's about the recipient being a vessel to receive. And that is a little tricky. Just because you want to share, and this is where we have to be careful, doesn't mean the recipient wants to be shared with, or wants to hear, wants to be inspired, wants to be influenced.
If they walk into my rooms on Clubhouse, they got to know what they're getting themselves into by then.
Oh, okay. If they're coming into Clubhouse and this is what you're sharing there, then of course, then there's no question. Because that's what it is. Exactly. If you're coming into Tanya over here, so this is what it is, and you're sharing, what that's without doubt. Then there's no question. And since you know Aleph and you know more than Aleph, so therefore you're sharing. Actually, last night we started this, and we'll continue this thought about in the TRC, which I enjoin everybody to still come and participate, is exactly that point. In the end, that's what we are, here to share. Now the question is what we're here to share. What does it mean to share? Who's sharing? What are you sharing? That's, then that's something that we need to come to better terms with. Okay, but yes, Marcy, absolutely. Thank you. Vicky, it seems that the feeling of being alone has arisen after knowing that God is with me. Arisen, and that I am not alone for many years. Is this aloneness something that can be from God to lead us to somewhere else? You're saying you know God now more than you did before, and now you're feeling more alone? That doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound good. Vicky, we're going to deal with that in TRC, since you're part of it. Okay? You'll bring that up, please. Okay. Sarah has on Instagram a question. Why does even knowing Hashem is with us and that they may have a few people to speak to, some may still be alone? Now it's the same question as Vicky. So Sarah, we're going to deal with this in TRC. Okay? All right, anything else? I don't see from anybody. Anybody else to share? All right, folks. 1 o'clock, Rambam. We have 3 days left to finish the entire Rambam. Amazing. Also, just to let you know, we've started, and I'm going to put up the flyer at some point. Actually, David, I might ask you to help me with that. But we are doing learning every day, 7 o'clock, 7:05 in the morning. Daylight savings time, that's Montreal time, New York time. California, it's 3 hours earlier, so kind of early. England or Germany, it's later in the day. Then we do the Torah portion with Rashi, something new and exciting, for me at least, to teach it, even though I've been doing it all the time. And we do that at 8:30, 8:40, depending on after services. And that's great because we're learning Rashi. And then we're here to join together. All right, amazing. And then Rambam. So we've got a full day of learning, of growing, And it's wonderful. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zirch and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining.